Welcome to the Gravity Well podcast with me, Jenny Yeremy. I host the Gravity Well to celebrate and share the stories of people looking to empower others with the knowledge and skills required to reestablish stability in our communities. My mission is to work through heavy issues in conversation and process in order to lighten the load. I acknowledge that I live on the traditional territories of Treaty 7 and Métis Districts 5 and 6. The treaties and self-governance agreements established by Indigenous peoples were created to honor the laws of the land, maintain balance with nature, and give back to uphold reciprocal relationships. This knowledge and intention are what guide the Gravity Well conversations. I ask for genuine dialogue, real hearts, and openness to different perspectives. This is your invitation to find common ground with me. Positions taken by participants, either individually or collectively, do not necessarily represent those of the Gravity Well. This podcast is dedicated to the natural world, our children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and all future generations. The Gravity Well is on YouTube and streaming wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you see and hear, remember to like and subscribe. Welcome to the studio, everyone. I'm super pleased to be having a very important conversation about public education, about upholding the Alberta advantage. The thing that Alberta is most known for is our education system. It's world class and it is being eroded actively. And I'm going to learn more about it today from some people that work very, very hard on this topic. So I have with me Jay Procktor, who is an Edmonton Public School teacher and a district representative with the Alberta Teachers Association. Trisha Estabrook is with Friends of Medicare, but she's a former school board trustee and journalist. LaFortune is the executive director of Public Interest Alberta. And Heather Quinn, the president of the ATA Edmonton Public Local 37, the second largest local in the province. Thank you all for being here. I've done a brief introduction, but I'd like you to do a proper one. How did you get into this work?
Sure. Thanks so much for having us today. I'm here in Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. I got into this work because I'm an Albertan. I care about public education and public services. So I've been with Public Interest Alberta now for 5 years, and it's never been more important for people to stand up for public education. So that's what brought me to it. I have a daughter who's in the public system, and I think we all need to seriously fight for what we have left here.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for being here. And Brad and I had an opportunity to collaborate together at the beginning of the recall campaign, which, standing up and helping each other seems to be a real problem in this province. So thank you for sticking with it despite that.
I'm Heather Quinn. I'm president of Edmonton Public Teachers Local 37 under the big umbrella of the Alberta Teachers Association. I've taught for 20 plus years now. Got my introduction to the local and the ATA just as most of us do in terms of being a council rep and attending the monthly meetings, and then was shoulder tapped and all goes from there, I guess. No one told me when I ran for president that I would have to utter the words COVID or longest strike demonstrations and all of those things. So it's good. It's good. I appreciate it. And I'm going to say that nothing is more gratifying than fighting for teachers and students. So.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, and for accepting a growing responsibility.
My name's Trisha Estabrook. How did I get into this? I was a school board trustee for 2 terms. I resigned in the middle of a huge strike by educational assistants and support staff within Edmonton Public Schools, which was a tough decision, but really felt like the right decision as a school board trustee and former board chair with Edmonton Public. I got involved because as a journalist with CBC for 17 years, I started to have pretty strong opinions about public education in our province. And so I left the CBC and ran for school board. And now I have the pleasure of advocating for public health care with Friends of Medicare.
Thank you, Trish. I've learned how important journalism is, especially the ones that are dedicated to truth. So thank you very much.
Hey, everyone. My name's Jay Procktor. Been an Edmonton public school teacher for just over 20 years now. I was traditionally a Div 1 teacher. I taught kindergarten, grade 1 for 13 years, grade 2. Right now I do outreach, helping with grade 6, 7 transitions and working with some of the most amazing kids that I've ever worked with. I got into this, well, number one, I just believe that every child has the right to a free and equitable public education system, regardless of their parents' socioeconomic status, their faith or lack of, their gender, their identity, all of it. And I believe it underpins everything that makes Canada, Canada, a free and democratic society. And I think that's really what's under attack when they go and attack public education. So I currently get half-time release from my teaching job to sit on the ATA as in a role called district representative for Edmonton Fort McMurray. So I'm one of 3 district representatives for Edmonton Public and Catholic, and Fort McMurray Public and Catholic. And I just want to be clear that today I am here as a rank and file member, as a teacher, and as a caring, concerned citizen. And I got into this work, I think like everyone, you're just concerned about what I saw happening probably a decade ago. We could tell when you're involved in this, the direction this was going to go, or that we were hoping it wasn't going to go. And like many, you wait around hoping that someone else is going to do that work. And then you wake up and realize, and you kind of go, oh, darn it, it's going to have to be me. So I encourage others who are feeling that feeling to listen to that feeling, because we need you involved in this fight and we need you running. So like Heather, I was tapped in. It's always that friend. It was a friend, Melissa, who tapped me in to get involved in the ATA. And then it was people like Heather encourage and find a good fit for me.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for recognizing the importance, all of you, for recognizing this is about democracy. Education is about, it's a foundational need in society, a free society. So thank you for acknowledging that and for fighting for it, and for acknowledging that we need to be our own leaders. Every one of us who feels like somebody isn't doing enough, it's got to be you, unfortunately. Okay, let's get into it. So let's hit the lowlights of Bill 25. It's the elephant in the room. Let's talk about this. It's for anything from a land grab. What should people understand? I just listened to some segments from the Jesperson show. It's very clear that the ATA is not really high on the list of people being sought for information from a public perspective. That's what I'm seeing. There's 17 lobby groups that just met with the province. That's my understanding. And what are the policies that are in it? So if you can each take a moment and hit some of these lowlights for folks, and if there are any highlights, let us know.
I want to start from a place of recognizing the irony that this is a bill that's seeking to address ideology in classrooms, and yet it's using ideology. Like the irony and the ridiculous nature of that, I just want to acknowledge that. And I do agree with some of the assessment and the analysis that I've read, that in some ways it is a distraction. But I think when I look at it through my eyes as a former school board trustee and board chair, what I see is a huge bill with many amendments that have quite far-reaching impacts for how school boards will operate in our province. In some ways, I see this as a way to instoke fear and exert control over school boards. And for many years, for the past decade, since the UCP have been elected, this is a government set on stripping autonomy away from school boards. And I don't mean to be dramatic by what I'm about to say, but by what I'm reading and by talking to former colleagues of mine and by talking to people who've served as trustees, I see this as truly the death knell for school boards in our province. We know other provinces have gone down this path. The way in which, and the details, and yes, we do need to see some of the regulations, but broad strokes, what I see in this bill and in these amendments is speaking to the end of school boards. And so when we talk about democracy and we talk about the importance of transparency and accountability, we know that when local decision makers are closest to the people they represent, which is the beauty of serving as a school board trustee, when we cut that idea out, when we get rid of local decision makers, there goes the transparency, there goes the accountability, and there goes that idea that, you know, you can speak to your local representative and you can advocate through them for all the great things that public education can give us. So broad strokes, that's what I'm seeing. I mean, 4 top things: allowing the education minister to set school authorities' priorities. So anyone who listens in on school board meetings will know that the strategic plan, setting the vision, the mission, the values, and the strategic priorities of a school division, that speaks to the very core of why school boards exist. And to take that decision-making authority, to take that ability to set those priorities out of the hands of school boards and into the hands of government, that to me speaks to the control that this government wants over school boards. The second thing, adding provincial oversight for naming or renaming of schools. Now, this one's a personal friend of mine. I tried to lead us down a policy discussion at Edmonton Public around renaming schools, because guess what? Students came to us and said, we don't feel comfortable going into a school named after a former member of the KKK.
No kidding.
And
you
not,
shouldn't.
right? No, exactly. So, but even naming schools, now school boards have lost the authority to do that. So that, to me, at its base, is saying we don't trust you. And we want to use this as another lever of control. The third thing is giving the minister the power to require a school authority to dispose of unused property to be used for another educational purpose. Let's cut through the crap on that one. This is about giving land and giving buildings directly to charter and private schools, which has been going on for a long, long time, right? But this is further solidifying that and making it nearly impossible for school boards. And I'll pause here and say that often school boards, especially right now in a capital crunch, right, and when revenues are down, they will use the sale of those buildings to bolster their own funds, right? That has now been taken away from us. That's the first thing I'd say around that. And the other thing is, in larger school divisions, school boards would have partnerships within closed schools. All of a sudden now we have the big hand of government saying those relationships don't matter, those partnerships don't matter. We're going to take that school and we're going to give it to a charter and forget the relationships that you've built for years, for example, with E4C, which is one of the partners that Edmonton Public has. And so again, exerting that control and not allowing school boards to be in charge of their own buildings and their own budget, right? And then this is the icing on the cake, my friends. This one, prohibiting school boards from making statements or taking positions on political and social topics. And so when I read that, it reads to me like if you speak out against anything political, if you speak out against the government, what happens? And so there's already this cover of fear, I would say. We are not seeing school board trustees. The two provincial associations, the Alberta School Boards Association has said nothing on Bill 25. Shame on them. PSBAA, they've released a statement to their credit, but school board trustees, board chairs are not speaking out. This to me speaks fundamentally to the idea that we elect school board trustees to speak up on behalf of the constituents and people they serve. This is totally neutering them. This is saying they can't even speak out. What's the point of having school board trustees? That, to me, those four key things show me that this government has no interest in maintaining a relationship with school boards. They don't see value in school boards. This is the death knell for school boards in this province.
Taught for more than 20 years as a high school social studies teacher. It's my jam. It's my passion. When you can get students involved and thinking critically about any topic, that's the aha moment. That's what we're all going for. The ability to see both sides of an issue and figure out not just perhaps where they may find themselves, but also in terms of being able to acknowledge why someone might feel differently or someone might think differently. When we look at Bill 25 and the effect that I think it will have on critical thinking, and how teachers approach those topics, I'll be honest, and we've heard the terms or the words already used, it's going to become, I feel, a culture of fear amongst teachers. And what will happen if some of these conversations or some of these topics come up organically through the route of teaching, that all of a sudden we find ourselves having to explain certain things, and now teachers feel like they're walking on eggshells because they don't know what they can say and what they can't say. It's meant to discourage, in my opinion, any sort of form of inquiry or any sort of debate on a bigger level, on a much broader scope. I feel, and we've seen this coming for a number of years, but I feel like it contributes to undermining democratic and civic education within this province. Pretty blatant removal of language from certain things, the removal of diversity, the removal of welcoming, the removal of caring and sense of belonging. That to me is very telling in terms of the direction that this government is going and some of the things that they do not want expressed within schools. And quite frankly, it is going to affect our marginalized students the most, those that find themselves in groups that tend to be, I don't want to say targets, but that are typically less supported. And so this is only going to serve to broaden or widen that gap and have students feel even less supported. We're already seeing the effects of some of the use of the notwithstanding clause with our 2S LGBTQIA communities, and that is only going to continue. And as any teacher or any administrator can tell you in any school, when those kids or members of that community do not feel supported, do not feel that they have a space, do not feel welcome in a safe and caring environment, the effects aren't minor. The effects can be catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the lowlights in this bill, right? We've got flag restrictions, we've got national anthems, you know, you have to play it once a week, you have to have a neutrality mandate, which is actually about stopping social teachers and other teachers who teach complex, you know, social and political and historical issues to students from that sort of critical pedagogy, right? And they're playing into that fear that parents have about, you know, public education being, you know, ideology that being imposed on students. The irony that Trisha pointed out is that what they're doing is they're imposing a deeply radical conservative ideology on classrooms. They're not removing politics from classrooms. And so when you take Bill 25, when you take Bill 28 that talks about materials in libraries outside of schools, and you also take what they've done in post-secondary education as well, and in other places, they're completely imposing their political agenda onto other institutions that should be free from direction and imposition from the provincial government, which is also ironic because their whole thing is, you know, Ottawa, get off of our neck. And we have our own, you know, sovereignty within a united Canada, and you can't tell us what to do on resources, on education, on healthcare, even. They want no strings attached. So, you know, to me, with Bill 25, it's another step in the direction that we've seen this government going for a long time. And I will just say, you know, just to end off here, you know, like, we have seen this premier say that her hero is Ayn Rand, right? Like the famous objectivist author, and that every high school student should be forced to read. I'm not sure if it's a Fountainhead or the other one, but like, this is someone who worships at the altar of Ayn Rand, who said that post-secondary institutions and public education are the most dangerous modern institutions in society because they teach people in our communities how to be engaged citizens and think critically for themselves with good tools that are taught to them by professional teachers. It's a threat to their ideology, right? And so I don't mean to put too fine a point on it, but I think it's really important for us to remember that, to me, this is part of a deeply ideological strategy that we've seen from the playbook, the MAGA playbook in the States, to defund and, you know, completely undermine public education that we're seeing here in Alberta. And so Bill 25 is just the latest step in that direction. And, you know, just in terms of even like one final detail, and then I'll stop yapping, like making school boards get approval for hiring their own boss as a superintendent. It's just insane the amount of control that they're centralizing within the cabinet through the Minister of Education with this bill. And I get it. There's going to be regulations and details that come out. And some people are saying this is a distraction. I think in part it is, but it is connected to the larger playbook that we're seeing be enacted right now. So there you go.
Well, and it rings true because Brad and I are on another group called the Coalition for Responsible Energy, very similar to what we're seeing on the regulatory perspective for oil and gas. I'll be specific. Just last week, it was announced that they are taking the property rights tribunal's autonomy away. They are putting in a board over top of it, and that's where decisions will be made based on the landowner's disputes. So if there's any issues, now there is a board that will be deciding that rather than a tribunal. So this is, again, about overreach, as you guys are describing.
Well, I just want to build a little bit off of what Brad was saying, because I just listened to the ed minister's interview on the Jesperson show and talking about political doublespeak and feeling like you're living in the upside down. And I got to give the man credit because he does a really good job of staying very composed. But I encourage people to really listen to the language or how he avoids certain language. But he really likes to bring up critical thinking a lot. Like, this is really going to help. Whereas anyone in our schools right now, and anyone who's having to teach the new curriculum, anyone who's looked at the new curriculum, and parents included, are seeing an erosion of just that, of those critical thinking skills, and a movement towards rote memorization, and especially in how we are assessing and expected to assess kids from K-3 and otherwise. And the movement away from pen and paper towards really rote computer generated, like computer examination. So yeah, pay attention to the doublespeak. And also at the end of the day, this is fundamentally also an erosion on our professional autonomy of teachers across this province.
Thank you. Thank you guys for helping shed light on this. As a parent, as a very concerned parent, it's great to hear from the people that know the best what these issues are, what they're bringing forward. There's a land grab in there. There's less autonomy in there. To me, it hits back to the thought of this principal that went ahead with a recall and was slapped for it publicly. This is making them think that somehow they can't participate in politics. This has far-reaching impacts in terms of their rights. We all have rights. We're professionals. Why would teachers not have that right?
Just one last thing that I think it's important for people to be aware of is that this legislation, I mean, it's not necessarily new or the brainchild of our premier. I mean, we've seen comparable legislations in 3 US states as well. We've got Florida's the Stop Woke Act. We've got the Texas House Bill, including discouraging controversial issues of public policy or social affairs. And then we've also got the bill out of Tennessee, the Divisive Concepts Laws, where it essentially prohibits or tries to get teachers to stop talking about certain things. Is a distinct pattern, and it's a playbook that is being followed by this government in terms of eroding public education.
Thank you so much for saying that, because yes, we have other places we can look to understand what's coming and to make sure we're moving forward.
And this is similar to what's happening in the United States as well. There's an irony in that, you know, back to the school board trustee piece, they're asking school board trustees to remain silent on anything, any political issue. And yet they've also put in place code of conduct principle for trustees to protect freedom of speech. So you can't have it both ways. And that is specific to the Monique LaGrange incident, by the way. That is specific to that. So on one hand, you're allowed to speak about anti-vax views, for example, but yet if you criticize this government, you'll be punished. And so the irony is pretty rich to me as well.
Let's talk about what the public can do about it, because I know that's the broadest audience we have here.
I would bet that the people that are listening to your podcast here are doing the things. We need people engaged in this process. Our work fundamentally is with teachers, and maybe I will speak to that a little bit later, but we need, you know, this government loves to not listen to the likes of us, people who are on the front line of working with kids every day and are trained to do so. But the others who vote, the parents, the grandparents, that larger community, they fear you even more than they fear us. And let's be honest, they're afraid of us. And we saw that during the strike. 3.5 weeks and our support grew. It didn't diminish. So all those people that were there supporting, we need you to continue to be engaged in this. And what they're doing is they're wearing us all down. And that's part of the game plan. That's part of the strategy. And you need to resist that. And we need you to lean in on this. Because like I said before, we were winning. They were afraid of us. And in the end, Bill 2, they had to cheat. It's their only way to win this. They cheated because they were afraid. And I think that's what we're seeing here again right now. There are people that are afraid. We need to be talking to each other about this. We need to be writing not only your school boards, right? Your MLAs, your representatives within the ATA, and telling them what your concerns are. And we need you to be involved in this fight with us.
Great. Yeah, trustees, I think, is something I can lean into too. I don't normally do that.
We've got to get loud again. We've got to stay loud and we've got to get loud. We have to be louder as well. I think that it's very clear to me that during the teacher strike that the majority of people that I saw were very supportive of what the teachers were doing for their own profession and also for the sake of public education. Same thing with the education support staff with CUPE when they went on strike. We know the support is there, but we can't take for granted that this government is ever going to do the right thing unless we force them to. It's going to take mass mobilization alongside, institutional lobbying and engagement with school board trustees. Yes, with the provincial government, keep writing those letters, but that mobilization that we saw from the teachers and then from the support staff, that really makes a difference, and that does make them nervous. I would add as well that, this is just a personal anecdote, but last week I was having a coffee with a school board trustee from somewhere in Alberta, and I won't name names obviously, but they were asking me about, Bill 25 and what our perspective was on it and what we could do to have a conversation in the public about it. It was a conversation that was like, okay, so who goes first here? I'm feeling compelled to say something as an individual school board representative, but I don't know, is it, we're waiting for somebody else maybe, or should we go first? I think it's up to all of us to support one another as well right now. And if you're having the thought about whether or not you should get out there and say something, whether it's writing a letter or starting a rally or having some sort of kitchen table conversation, anything, go out and do it, because it really does make a difference. And sometimes it takes a long time to really hit that critical mass, but it does make a difference. All that we can do is keep mobilizing, educating, and organizing. I know it sounds simple, but it's a ton of work. We have to, because this government in particular, I think, has shown that they have a very rigid ideological agenda. They didn't run on privatizing the public education system. They ran on strong education, and they ran on saving healthcare, right? Again. And then what we see is, for the first time in our country's history, they're going to be building charter and private schools through this budget, right? So if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So I think it's about mobilization. I think it's about encouraging each other and just keep doing what you're doing. Because I agree. I think a lot of people on your podcast are already doing the thing. So keep it up. If you can do more, do more.
Great to be around teachers. I can tell you myself from the recall. So this is a really public interest. We got to look after each other.
In terms of what the public can do, there's two things that I want to speak on first. Is that first and foremost, we know that the Alberta Teachers Association they're nonpartisan. People confuse that with us being political. And so we will always, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the ATA, but especially on behalf of our local, we will always be political when it comes to public education and when it comes to what's best for students and teachers. So just kind of putting that out there as the basis. The second piece, in terms of what the public can do, I would echo what has already been said, but I think it's important to also point out that some of the only times where we have seen a reversal by this government has been because of the public outcry or the outcry from parents. And I'm thinking, and Trisha would be able to remember this as well, but the reversal on the cutting of funds to the school nutrition programs. It wasn't until there was a huge outcry from parents that was reversed. Jay has already mentioned they're not listening to teachers. They don't care what we think. They've made that very obvious. As a matter of fact, so obvious that they have written it into legislation to silence us. So that's very telling. But the second piece that I would also say in terms of the public is they need to get active. They need to start showing some voice. And it's hard because I know when we look at the number of people that are parents in society, it's roughly around 33%. It's not a huge amount. When we talk about those people that have a stake in public education, very often the finger gets pointed towards parents who have children in the system. I'd like people to remember that we all benefit from public education and the products of public education, because a public education is for the public good and it benefits all of us in society. And so when that is threatened, when that is under fire, it is up to absolutely all of us, not just teachers, not just parents, but everybody to fight for that and to raise their voices for it. I do want to say one more thing, and I will qualify this in that I know being an elected official is hard. You are getting hit from all sides, if you will. But as school boards, as public trustees of public education and the common good, I would say that our public boards, our school trustees, and not that some of them haven't already, but there needs to be a greater voice there speaking out against some of this, all of it. I understand, and there's always been sort of that looming threat of school boards being dissolved and all of the things, but at this point, I would agree with Trisha. What do we got left to lose? It seems to be that is the track that they're on already. So why not go down fighting? Why not go down fighting for what is right and what is good and what is just and what is in the best interests of students?
Again, like there's so much at stake here. And this government we have seen has chosen fear and control instead of respect and collaboration. So you know what we can choose? We can choose collaboration. We can choose to work together and support each other. And that's why I love conversations like this, because it shows that together we truly can be stronger and we can unite and uplift each other's voices. I think back to the strike and how the public had the backs of teachers during that strike. And I agree with you, Brad. We need to mobilize in a way that shows that the public has the backs of public education right now. And as Heather so eloquently said, public education isn't just for, the kids that are in school and their families. It's for their grandparents and their aunts and uncles and their neighbors. It is for everyone. And I think it's incumbent on us as civil society to talk about public education as a moral investment, as something that's worth investing in. And so the more people that understand that message and share that message, I think the stronger that will resonate. I can't underscore enough being on the receiving ends of many emails when I was a board chair and a school board trustee, like write to your trustee, understand the roles, the critical role that a school board trustee plays. Educate yourself, reach out to your trustee, write to your MLA. And as all of you have said, get loud, get vocal. There's a lot at stake, and now is the time to speak up.
I remember when, Trish was a school board trustee, we had some good conversations, mostly really positive, all of them really productive. But that sort of engagement that we can have with, school board trustees who share our values, that education is a public good, really matter. So for those of you who are elected who might be listening now, yeah, I think I agree with Heather. It's time to get loud. And also for those of you who might be thinking about taking that step into a public role, we need people to move into that direction as well. Being elected, I think, is hard. I hear it's hard. I've worked for a lot of elected folks. I've never done it myself. I don't think I ever will. But we need good people who believe in public education to do it. And we got to support each other when we do. And that means having good, productive, and sometimes challenging conversations. And then last but not least is there's a big elephant in the room for me all the time when we're talking about public education. And it's this woke elephant or whatever that they call it, right? It's this idea that when we're in Sedgwick, and I don't want to pick on people in Sedgwick, but, in places that they're getting this dogma from the government that teachers and, staff are indoctrinating our kids to, I don't know, become cultural Marxists and never work and overthrow society at the same time or whatever it is. People are genuinely, taken by that propaganda. And it's really important for us, when Chris says to engage, we have to engage in hard places too. We have to have hard conversations with people who don't agree with us, and we have to show up with respect and humility and the facts. We know who we are and what we believe. We can't cede that ground because there are forces out there that have a lot of money and a lot of influence right now with this government who are just spreading a lot of misinformation that is compelling to certain communities in our province. And that's really dangerous. So I think what we can do is think about ways to have those conversations in an organized capacity beyond just, sometimes when I'm on the keyboard and I'm on Twitter for my sins and yelling about it, but having real conversations with people who might disagree with us. And we have to get out there.
Thank you. And you underscored something that we didn't touch on and need to still, which is who is informing the government. I'm concerned about these 17 lobby groups. I've seen a lot around this Cardis think tank that is potentially helping inform policy for this government. Anything you want to say there, please?
Well, just really quickly, I've been watching this for a few years, as I know all of us have, that we should be, as a government, we should be listening to teachers, staff, parents, experts. And instead, what this government is doing is they're listening to special interest groups that are largely led by individuals who have a very, I would say, a very elitist and ideological view of what education should be. And, it really does involve a massive shift towards charter and private schools and defunding public education and a lot of control, which is what we're seeing seep into the policy and legislation now. So it's groups like Parents for Choice, it's groups like Cardis, it's also the charter and private school foundations, organizations, or companies that some have direct ties or pretty direct ties to the premier's office, Google, Rob Anderson. That's who they're listening to. And then, it's obvious when you look at the policy that's coming out, but that makes it all the more important for us to mobilize public support and public pressure, because we're not getting through with our lobbying strategies.
It's all public who they're meeting to. So just a quick glance who they met with in the lead up to Bill 25. I see 5, 6, 7 meetings alone with various charter school organizations, private schools, Classical Academy, the Education Partnership Foundation. The list goes on and on. Parents for Choice in Education is on speed dial with this government. They have influenced policies, not just in education, but in other areas as well. Policies that, and Heather referenced this early on, that are having catastrophic impacts on the lives of kids in our school, right? We know who they're meeting with. Now is the time to shine a light on it.
Certain schools that are potentially not getting dollars based on ethnic background.
What that was sort of about is that we are hearing from teachers and administrators across the province that funding is now being withheld from certain boards in regards to things like where a student's immigration status has not been completely processed, or where their renewal is still sort of in process. That to me is hugely problematic, because regardless of who you are, where you come from, what your belief systems are, every single child that resides in this province, and quite frankly anywhere across the world, should be getting a quality public education as part of their upbringing. And when parents see what's going on in the US down south with ICE, and when they hear about things like that, or even see some of the same policy creep among other social issues, if you will, making their way to their northern neighbors, of course they are going to start wondering, what is next? And is it safe to send my child, who may not like using the term undocumented, because I don't necessarily feel that that is a fair term, but when their official paperwork, if you will, has not yet been completed, those kids should be in school regardless. I struggle with what we're hearing in that regard, because we are now making a determination as to whether or not somebody deserves an education, deserves to be in a safe and caring and welcoming public school. And that to me is hugely problematic. The only other piece that I'll weigh in on in regards to these 17 lobby groups, as Trisha mentioned, have a look to see how many of them are based in religion. Have a look to see how many of them are based in so-called Christian principles. And when they are lobbying for charter and private schools to receive more funding, when they can, without cause, without reason, turn kids away when they don't like that they might have additional needs, learning disabilities, or might not meet their set criteria of what they determine to be an ideal student, that's a problem. And it's a problem that more and more parents need to become aware of.
Public ed is for everyone. And like you said, it's not even just for every student, it's for every person. Like, people need to understand, it's just like healthcare. I'm not necessarily using it at the moment, but I certainly will. And for me to ignore any of this happening to any student is a bad sign for my being looked after by this government, period. Okay, let's get into what sort of reform we can look at. I know this is big for big discussion, hot topic. Let's get into it. What sort of Alberta Teachers Association reform can you guys see that is needed, and how can teachers come together to make this happen?
So Heather Quinn is my local president. And for years, while I've been sitting on provincial executive council for the ATA, we go into schools and we have conversations with teachers. We get release time so we can do that. And we believe our work is going and having these conversations with our teachers and hearing, with our colleagues, hearing how they're doing and where they're at. Since the strike, we've been going in just continuing these conversations, and we call them strike debrief conversations. And a lot of it's just hearing where people are at. And they're not easy conversations. We were at a school a couple of weeks ago, and it took over an hour to go around the circle of 26 teachers. And then the talking stick that ended up being used was a tissue box, because they're doing the best they can, but they're struggling. So what I'll share are things that, I'm not saying these are the things that should be done. I'm saying these are conversations coming from teachers and comments coming from teachers that I think are important for us to be having and moving forward. As much as Bill 2 and how that strike ended was hard, I look at the far right a lot to see what we can learn. And I think that this crisis in many ways is an opportunity. And if we choose to go back to the status quo as it was before the strike, which is a choice we could do, it's potentially a lost opportunity. And teachers are asking hard questions, not out of anything other than they care about public education and they care about the Alberta Teachers Association. And frankly, they're tired of losing. And they're asking, how do we do this differently? Because status quo is unsustainable. This isn't working for people.
We're tired of losing. We're also keenly aware that ways in which things were addressed or previously dealt with or handled or find solutions for with previous governments, this is not our parents' conservative government. It is the same techniques that were used then and previously cannot be expected to work against this government. And we've seen that. And so I guess one of the things that we are hearing most from our members is that they want to see more fight. They want to see more teeth, and they want to see more pushback. What they don't want is to not push back. They don't want to not fight and at least try.
When we look at that strike, and it's hard for teachers right now because in the end, you give up 3.5 weeks of pay. There's no strike pay. Emotionally, you go out there and you're fighting hard, and they did. And for it to end, to be treated like they were in the end, it's hard. But there are wins here, and I'm hoping we're getting to a place where we can look at that. No one knew what was going on in our classrooms before that strike. And everyone across this province knows. And they know that, I would argue, not because of the work of someone like myself on provincial. They know that because the rank and file members did the work. They knew where their power was, and they engaged in that. And so did the locals. So if you look at the members, their social media game was stellar. Their sign game and getting out to rallies was awesome. They wore red, they put stickers on their cars, and most importantly, they were having really difficult conversations with their extended family, with their community, with that uncle at Thanksgiving dinner. They were doing that work in line. I know I had conversations wearing the shirts in line at the grocery store, right? We were constantly engaged in that work. And what that showed us is really fundamentally where our power lies. And members are asking that. They saw it. They saw it at the local level. They saw it at the membership level. They're asking for that union side to be more engaged with. So when we talk about other unions and other work that they have done, they've utilized that very thing that we saw was the most successful in our strike that we seem to be no longer talking about. And the members are asking us to talk about this. Like, what if we trained one school rep for every 15 teachers in a school to be that one that you can go to, not just as like a deliverer of mail, but a conduit from the association to the membership and from the membership back? Why do we train them to how to have these hard conversations, right? How to have conversations with the larger public? Because we have an army of teachers, as we saw during that strike, who are willing and more than capable to do this work. So they're asking to be engaged in this more. They're also asking for more autonomy at the local level. And they're asking, like Heather said, we have a union side and a professional side of the ATA, and we have amazing staff and amazing people doing great work. But what we're asking is, what is that balance? And maybe we're looking for a little bit, there's a professional side there. We need that. But can we put more resources, money, and time into building up that union side and building up our locals and building up our membership?
And it's a reminder too, and I think about your experience too, Jenny, in terms of organizing the recall petitions. Like, what has happened, and maybe this is a bit of a silver lining, and we need a bit of optimism right now, I think, is that this province is testing our organizational skills. And the silver lining of that is, yeah, teachers are political, right? Like in my current job with Friends of Medicare, we went to 4 different teachers conventions, and I was overwhelmed and so heartened by the way in which teachers were engaging with our message around public health care, because they see their story in our public health care system as well. And so the silver lining in my mind is that this government has activated us and has grown our movement and has contributed to this momentum. And yeah, none of us want to be in this situation, but we are preparing and we are teaching and we are organizing, we are educating. I remember on the picket line, do you remember this, Jay? You gave me that bracelet. I can see it on the screen here. You gave me the one that said educate. And that's what we need to do. We need to agitate, we need to educate, we need to organize, and this province is teaching us how to do that, and we're building on that. So there's the bright spot for all the mess that we're in right now.
I agree. That is the bright spot. We have a challenge before us, which is a massive opportunity. So I just want to say that right off the bat, and then talk a little bit. I'm just feeling inspired by just hearing Jay and Heather talk about organizing internally. It's really, in my experience in different settings, I'm not a teacher, but being, a community organizer and having worked around the labor movement, like, you have to show up with like your full heart if you really want to organize well. And you really have to listen to people and connect with them and ask them what they want to do, not tell them what you need them to. It's hard, but it's so worth it, because we saw, it was the teachers after the education support staff, CUPE. The only thing that makes this government blink or bring down the nuclear option, as they did with ATA, is standing up to them. Because we're talking about standing up to bullies, right? We're talking about education. One of the most important things I ever learned was that, the best thing to do is show solidarity with people who need it and stand up to bullies when you need to. And that's what we have. We have a big bullying government that's trying to take rights away from entire swaths of the community. Jay's talking about learning from the right. And I'll just say, like, one thing that I've learned that we need to do inversely opposite to the right is build bigger and stronger bridges instead of dividing communities and people. And that's also hard work, but man, when you can bring people together around a common cause, that's really powerful stuff. And the stakes are so high. Like, it's a silver lining with a little bit of a warning for me, which is that, like, we, unions, civil society, groups like Friends of Medicare, PIA, others, all of us community organizers are not going to be as strong in a year from now as we are today, because we know that this government is taking its playbook from the United States, and they flood the zone and they're trying to dismantle institutions, government, non-government, everything in between, to weaken the ability for us to organize in like really aggressive ways. And so, like, the time is now, right? Can't wait for the next election. And so that's just kind of what I'm thinking about here a little bit.
Jay and I talk about organizing. What we're referring to is essentially having those face-to-face conversations and listening more than we talk, and just taking in what it is that people are feeling and what it is that they are hoping for and want. Building of connections and of relationships with people, because that's when it comes to organizing, and eventually when you have that ask, that is what is going to get people to come out, as we saw with a lot of those rallies. So
yeah, we need to work like the far right. And the reality is we saw success. And thank you for bringing success back into this conversation, because let's use some real life examples. Evan Lee, did anybody know who he was before this? Look at what a following this kid has now, and rightfully so. He is a champ. We look at the teachers that I have met through the recall. I feel 5 times the person I was before the recall started. I have 5 new teacher friends that I'm a geophysicist that has a lot of ideas that a lot of people don't understand. These teachers take what I say and make it logical for the 5th grade student. This is what's come into the fight for Alberta that we have to acknowledge. The fact that we saw more than 50,000 people at legislature for teachers shows that we know how fundamental this is and how we have the power when we use it regardless. I want to talk about the autonomy. I feel really excited about the thought of you guys just creating your own structures to help people have conversations. When I look at the recall, the reason why I think my recall was as successful as it was, because I took the time to talk to every single canvasser on a regular basis and have the conversation about what we're trying to achieve and how I can support them in doing that. None of this is complicated, but it's difficult. It's not easy to have those, but it's easier over time as we work that muscle. It does get easier. So thank you. I think we have a lot to go off of here. That's how I feel, very empowered. Again, you guys are the educators and the organizers of society. We just need to empower you. And I'm really excited to be working with you and having these conversations. Okay, Jay, I know you wanted to have more to say. Lead off the closing thoughts, please.
Thanks, Jenny, and thanks for everything you're saying and you're doing. There's one thing we're missing too in all this, because these topics are heavy. Like, it's fun. I didn't know these other people until I got involved in this work, and we're a good time. And we don't often talk about that part of it because it is heavy, but you can't do this heavy work without caring for each other and making it fun. So I want to encourage people to get involved. I'm going to wrap around to that, but there's one other thing I want to do, because I want to give a shout out to Brad at PIA and Nancy at Edmonton Public School Advocacy Network. If it wasn't for them, they are the ones that helped us organize the picket lines or the strike lines or whatever, the daily protest lines or whatever I'm allowed to say they were. But they got teachers out in Edmonton, and it grew in Edmonton and it grew around this province. And then again, it's just a testament to this idea of larger community. It isn't just the ATA. It isn't just teachers. It isn't, right? It is all of us together fighting for something a shared good that we know is important. It's not necessarily, I don't have kids in the system. I'm not doing this for me. It's for the teachers and the kids coming after. This fight matters. But I want to thank them, and I want to thank Trisha. Trisha was out on the line too and bringing hot chocolate and doing the petition and engaging, and Heather Quinn and Amber, Edmonton Catholic, our local presence, they formulated those rallies, the largest rally in Alberta history, with their executive and with the membership. Like, it takes a village of all these people doing that work. I encourage you to run for school board. I encourage you to get involved in your parent association. I encourage you to run for the ATA. I ran unopposed last time. There's 3 of us. We ran unopposed in Edmonton Public. And to be honest, that happens across Alberta. There are many people in our roles as district representatives who have run unopposed. We're acclaimed election after election. And that to me isn't a sign of a healthy union. We need you to, if you engage in this work, be a part of this work and run and be a part of this, or join at your local level. Be engaged in it, because again, it is fun. It's work, but it's fun and it matters. And we need you to be a part of this. So please.
Well, I want to thank you for hosting the conversation. First of all, thanks, Jenny, and for everything that you're doing on the recall. I remember after it wrapped up and we were talking, and you already knew it, but I wanted to tell you it was such a success because of the thousands of people that you were able to connect with. And then what comes after that, right? Because organizing is a constant process. It doesn't stop, right? You win, you take some licks, you keep going, and you build on all of that. So amazing work. And then to, Jay and Heather and Trisha as just stalwarts in public education and advocacy in general, like, I think we all benefit from learning from each other and leaning on each other, especially because things are sometimes tough out there. I have days where I wake up and I think, holy moly, I'm going to move to BC as well, like everyone's talking about. But then I'm like, no, Alberta's my home. And I love this place, and it's worth fighting for. And it is a ton of fun. Like, I remember a ton of potatoes being dropped on the steps of the legislature by Local 37, or, you know, the walks every morning that Heather and Jay and others were organizing, and we like played a supportive role and like met literally hundreds of teachers and families and education staff, like people that I, like you said, Jay, like I wouldn't know otherwise, and they're still out there, and it's that's how you build community. And so it's a real joy and it's a real privilege to do this kind of work. So thank you again for the conversation. I really appreciate it.
What I'm sort of left thinking about is, yeah, there's a lot of noise right now, and we need to acknowledge that. But there are ways that we can cut through the noise, right? There are organizations doing great work that can help make sense of everything that we're going through right now. And so I know a lot of folks that I work with have a sense of feeling overwhelmed. But one way that you can deal with feeling overwhelmed or feeling frustrated is to funnel that into action and to do something, to get off your screen, get off of Twitter, stop scrolling, right? Like actually get out and have conversations with people, because we know that when we have that face-to-face conversation, build those relationships, that's where the magic happens, right? And certainly working with educators, as long as I did as a school board trustee, they taught me that it's all rooted in relationships, right? And so I think we just need to get back to basics in terms of organizing, in terms of building those relationships, and knowing that there is hope out there. There's incredible people doing incredible work right now, and you just need to find the helpers in society right now. So yeah, leave it there. Thanks, Jenny. This has been a great chat.
Yeah, fabulous. It's so true. We just are educating each other and organizing each other. It's not complicated. This is really good. I know, Jay, you're doing some writing on Substack, so people look out for that. Some more information from you there.
Thank you, Jenny, for all of the work that you do. I guess just in closing, we've talked a lot about fun and how that sort of brings people together. And I would just echo that those morning walks, those demonstrations, if you will, it wasn't just teachers. It was members of the community. It was parents. It was grandparents. It was friends. Whole lot of dogs. Oh my God, all the dogs in their little red t-shirt outfits, and teachers dressing up as Animal from the Muppets. It was the inflatable dinosaurs, which we got the idea from our QP colleagues during their strikes. It has to be fun in order to bring about some levity. I mentioned earlier in the conversation around the ATA being nonpartisan, but that teachers, I would say by definition, are political. We want what's good and what's right and what's just for students and teachers in public education in this province. And so that said, I think part of the reason why, and Jay alluded to this before, part of the reason why parents and the public are now fully aware of what our classrooms look like is because we had those tough conversations. We need to encourage teachers and our members to keep having those conversations. We need to stop masking. We need to stop covering, thinking that it will somehow reflect on us for not being good enough or not doing a good enough job, even though we're putting in countless unpaid hours and weekends and time away from our own families. We need to start having some very frank conversations with parents, maybe at parent-teacher interviews or at open houses, around what the lack of funding from this government has done and how it has eroded public education and how it has contributed to the state of our classrooms right now, and why we have such huge class sizes, and why we don't have enough infrastructure, and why our boards are millions, if not billions of dollars in unallocated infrastructure projects. It is a tough conversation to have because we, as teachers, we inherently feel it reflects bad on us, but it's not us. And quite frankly, it's not our boards. This fault, if you will, lies squarely with the government. And so it's those conversations that we need to keep having. The last thing I would say is to our government, quite frankly, and you created this monster. You have incited all of us to become better at organizing, to push back, to fight back. You saw just a small taste of that with these rallies and with this strike. Be careful what you ask for, because that is not the last that you will see from us.
It's so true. Like, Brad and I have had a conversation about teachers are structural organizers. You don't have the luxury of choosing where to lead. You have to lead everyone that comes into your classroom, regardless of what they think. And that type of organizing is a skill that most people don't have. It's a challenging, you guys are challenged in that every single day. And so, yes, it's time to flex that muscle and to teach others how to use that muscle as well. So thank you guys so much for recognizing this is the fight. This is not the time to give up. This is the time to lean in and use our power and come together, and we will win, because you're right, Heather. We know we can, based on what we saw just a taste of already. Thank you guys so much for your time. I'm happy to do this anytime it's meaningful for you. Thank you so much. Take care for now.